fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the podcast to be named later, PTBNL, the Phillies podcast here in the Always Next Year Podcast Network. I am Rob. Tonight I am joined by Joe Berardi and Andrew Santangelo. Guys, how's it going?
Evening, gentlemen. How's it been?
It's going pretty good. What about you guys?
Doing great. Can't complain. Phillies baseball is here. So,
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God, right? It was a long winter without it, especially the Eagles and early playoff exit. The Sixers struggling the way that they have been. Flyers doing great, but we need some baseball to kind of get us going into the spring here. So once again, if you are on social media, you can find the Always Next Year Podcast at Always Next Year Podcast. Not sure. I don't think we have one yet for the podcast to be named later, just because it really is a podcast to be named later. We haven't named it yet, so we haven't come up with a Twitter handle. Where can we find you guys on Twitter?
You can find me at Bros of Biscuit. Both B's are capitalized, and yeah.
And I am AJ_Santangelo.
All right, and you can find me at radio_Rob. Joe, I always want to ask you where that Twitter handle came from.
So in my when I was in high school, I was in a class and there was like a handful of Joes. So the teacher wanted to come up with like different nicknames for all three of us. And I sat next to this really weird kid who just turned around and was like, I think we should call Berardi Joe Biscuit because he looks warm and buttery like a biscuit. And it was it was really the strangest thing anyone's ever said to me. And I told that story in college, and it kind of started to stick, and I just learned to embrace it. So Broseph Biscuit it is. Yeah,
sometimes you just gotta roll with it, man. That's as strange as...
Oh, yeah. And it was funny then. I never thought it was that weird. People were like, wow, that was really, really weird. But I didn't mind. I know I'm kind of a quirky guy myself, so I can easily embrace something like that, I guess.
Maybe that's how we've got to differentiate you from Joe Bork, who is also a member of this podcast.
Yep.
Unable to join us tonight.
Start calling me Biscuit. That's when you know we're boys. If you start calling me Biscuit instead of Joe or Berardi or anything, that's how you know we're boys. So feel free to call me at any time.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. All right, so moving on to the topic of this podcast, Phillies baseball. Through 10 spring training games, the record is 7-3. Nobody really cares about the record, though, in spring training. It's kind of meaningless. I kind of want to get into is the performance of the guys who are projected to be the starting nine so far. And obviously you can't count Andrew McCutchen into that because he hasn't played and he's not going to be ready until after the start of the season. So, and position players. So we're going to have 7 guys that we talk about here. And have you guys been able to keep up with this team throughout the course of the spring training and I guess really get a good idea of how some of these guys are doing?
Yeah, I've been able to watch a good handful of games, the ones that have been televised, and the ones that aren't. I love to follow it and just look at what they're doing out there and watch the small highlights that are out there. So I've been able to keep up with it a good amount.
Yeah, same. Even when I'm at work, I'll usually have it on the radio if they're playing the game on the radio, or I try to watch with the app if I can. And it's been, 7-3, as you mentioned. No one cares about the record in spring training, but it's been fun watching them. I think it's a little bit more tedious. Like I'm kind of just itching for the regular season to get started, just because there's nothing like the Harper signing or watching Harper play his first spring training game, and I think that's kind of taken away a lot of the hype. So I'm kind of just itching for the regular season, but it's been fun so far, especially a lot of the younger guys. They've been really fun to watch.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see some of these younger players go out there and try to make their case for being on the team. I think it was Rafael Betancourt had 2 home runs in the game tonight. I was listening on the radio. But yeah, let's get into the guys who are going to be the starters on the Major League team on opening day. And we can start with the BCIB, the catcher, JT Realmuto, the guy who is in search of a contract extension, and hopefully they get that done sooner rather than later. But in the early going, he's had 9 plate appearances so far, a couple of base hits, a 222 average. You know, it's early. A lot of these guys, really all of them, are just working out the kinks. But what do you expect from JT this season?
Should I start?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
I just like he was last season, if not probably a little bit better. I don't think he'll get off to such a slow start now that he's comfortable with everything. Kind of similar to Bryce. I think they were both in the same boat where they transitioned here really late into the off season. Well, I mean, it was practically spring training when Bryce signed. So I think now that they're both in an environment where they're comfortable, they know what roles they're going to play in the clubhouse. I expect big things for JT this year. I think I like to hope that the contract extension is completed by March 26. I don't know how likely or far along those conversations may be, but even if the contract extension leaks into the season, or maybe it doesn't get done until about midway point through the season, I think that just kind of gives them a little bit more to play for. But I do expect that to be done by opening day.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I obviously hope the contract gets done because it's well deserved. I wish they could have got it done in a better way than having him go through arbitration and stuff. But he seems like a class act and handled that very well. It seems like, and hasn't really taken anything bad notes at the Phillies organization. And then as far as his playing, I mean, I think it's going to be tough for him to kind of beat anything statistically just because he had career numbers. I mean, he had his most home runs in his career and most RBIs. So I think he's going to have a very similar type approach at the plate. And I think his defense has been hands down great. I think he has a great chance to win a Gold Glove again. And then I think like you said, he's going to settle in better and get off to a better start. So I think you're going to see a good rise in his average a little bit. So I think it's going to help him in that sense. And then hopefully guys get on base this time so he can get him more RBIs.
Yeah, Andrew, you make a really good point about his defense. Defensively, I got to say, he's probably the best catcher out there. And it's just insane how even the fastest guys, even the best base stealers, have trouble stealing bases against him. And it doesn't even matter how quick the pitcher is to home plate, because JT, like, sometimes it seems like he's already up and throwing to the base before he even catches the pitch. Like that's how good he is at nailing some of these runners. Defensively, he is absolutely elite. I think I'll say it again, I think he's the best defensive catcher in baseball. And offensively, I mean, how often do you see a catcher who can hit in the high 200s, maybe even up near 300, with some sneaky power and driving the RBI total that he does? There aren't many catchers that can do that. And JT's been doing it consistently throughout his career. So I expect nothing less than that from him this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the big thing with him that makes him the best catcher in baseball is he's got it all. Usually you see either a catcher just be straight up defense and then you hope he can get a hit here and there, or the opposite where you'll take a couple pass balls or something like that because he's so good at offense. But he's a full player, and he can even, I mean, he's not going to go out and steal you 50 bags a year, but he's even not afraid to take the chance of stealing a few bags, which I think brings up another great point with him. And I think the big thing with him is with the way he throws guys out is he's just so quick to hop up and he gets it out. And the difference is he's nice and accurate compared to, like, I know obviously they're completely different players, but like the Jorge Alfaro when he was here, I mean, everyone was amazed by how fast he could throw the ball, but he was just so wild with the way he'd throw it down the second, and it'd just be like you didn't know where the ball was going. You knew he was going to get it down there fast, but I think that's the big difference is it's not always about the speed of the throw more than the accuracy.
Yeah, JT's so good about putting that throw right into the path of where the runner is going to be, so whoever's covering second base can just, catch it and slap the tag on the runner in one fell motion. You're right. Alfaro had a gun for an arm, and he made some really nice throws, but he was pretty inaccurate sometimes, and JT's just been on the money with all of his throws. And as far as the contract extension goes, I'm with you guys. They got to get that done ASAP because if he gets off to a hot start, which I think he has a very good chance of doing, he's only going to drive his value up. And so right now, the sooner you can get him, the cheaper you're going to get him. All right, so we'll move on now to the position of first base, and that will be manned this season by Rhys Hoskins, who had a very strange 2019 season. Started off very hot. It looked like him and Bryce were going to be the Bash brothers. And then all of a sudden, as Bryce got hot in the second half of last season, Rhys kind of fell off the face of the earth. He is statistically, I believe, the worst hitter in all of Major League Baseball. Where do you guys have Rhys as far as his performance goes this upcoming season?
I would just like to say that I think, falling off the face of the earth was a nice way to put it, because it was really, really bad, especially because he was so good in the first half. He seemed like he was finally coming into his own as a major league player. I don't think he was as streaky in the first half. He was just a bit more consistent. The power was there. And then the second half was just garbage. I'm going to be honest. I love Rhys Hoskins. I think he's has potential. I think he can be really good. I'm just not that high on him. And I could be totally wrong about this. He might have a really stellar year and prove me wrong completely. But I feel like one thing that I have noticed in spring training, and I've seen this mentioned on Twitter, he kind of still lets a lot of balls go right down the middle. I don't know if that's something you guys have noticed as well, but I think
that's something that I caught on to last season.
Yeah, he was doing it a lot then too. I just think he's still doing that, and I think I like to hope his new stance, new swing, whatever works for him. But I don't know. It's concerning. He's someone I'm a bit more concerned about. I could be totally wrong though, and he could be amazing, which I hope is true. But
I'm with you. I noticed the him taking a lot of pitches too, and the thing I think I noticed, which I think bringing a new hitting coach is going to be a big thing for him. I think the moment they tried to put him at the leadoff spot last year is where his game really started to change, because they were all last year they were so driven on taking pitches, working the counts and stuff, and when he got to that leadoff spot, I think he really felt like he couldn't swing at everything. And I think that's really where his game started to switch. I don't remember which point in the season they put him at leadoff, but I think that's when I really noticed his game really started to dip down. And I really think that's where a guy like Joe Dillon, who seems to be the opposite kind of aggressive guy, and a mix with Joe Berardi is really going to help Hoskins in that sense. And I mean, even with his very big struggles in the second half, he still had 29 home runs and 85 RBIs, which is obviously pretty good numbers in that sense. So that's why I think if they are able to find a way, those guys can really help him. And I just think I think that's the big thing with him, and hopefully he can buy into that system and just get back to where he's at.
I'm going to be completely honest. I used to be a big Rhys guy. Obviously, he got off to that really hot start when he first came up to the major leagues, and his first full season, he hit pretty well for the most part. Last season was, after that great start, hitting the grand slam on opening day. Everybody thought, oh, this is going to be a huge, huge season for Rhys Hoskins, and then he just turns around and puts in a pretty much a total clunker. I don't put a whole lot of stock into spring training performance, but it is worth noting that he's only hitting 200 so far in 15 at-bats, 3 hits and 15 at-bats. I don't really know where I stand on Rhys Hoskins anymore. We know that the power is there. We also know that he's probably not going to hit for that high of an average. I think that this is the season where the jury is really going to be out on Rhys. And if he doesn't play well this season, he might be on the move somewhere. So we're going to see what he's made of this year. If he comes out and if he hits the cover off the ball, if he hits for a respectable average with the power that he's produced in past years, then yeah, his spot will be fine for the Phillies in the future. But if he's still hitting for a low average, if he's still striking out a whole lot, then I think the Phillies, for them, it might be time to look into who's going to be next at first base. So it's a big season for Rhys, and I'm not as sold on him as I once was.
Yeah, and I especially think with Alec Boehm, waiting in the wings and that conversation of if he can really stick it at third base. maybe that puts a little pressure on Hoskins to live up to, perform up to expectation or up to par because, you can put Bohm at first base and, a situation where Gene Segura, Scott Kingery, are both performing up to expectation, and Didi Gregorius is playing well. If Hoskins, I don't see this ever really being a case happening, but if he struggles, I mean, you could totally bench him and put Bohm there to bring him up to start the season. So that's kind of where I stand on Hoskins.
All right, so moving on to second base, and this is kind of something that is a little bit up in the air. It just happened recently. Joe Girardi making the decision to move Scott Kingery to second base and move Gene Segura over to third base. Now, do you guys think that's going to stand when the start of the season comes around, or do you think that those guys, that Segura will be back at second and Kingery will be back at third?
I think Girardi really wants Kingery to get to second. I think he came out and said it before where he wants Kingery to just play at second base and then kind of finally find a spot for him to be there at second because that's his natural position. So I think that's what he's going to go with. I mean, I trust him. He's got good experience, but in the few games from spring training, I know in game one, especially when Segura played third, he kind of made me a little worried at third. So just from the very few that we've been able to see, I'd say Segura or Kingery's looked better at third just from what we've seen last year as well. But I mean, again, I trust Girardi. He's a veteran manager and he's been good before. So I think it's time for me to just put the trust in Girardi.
I'm with you. I'm trusting in Joe Girardi as well. Kingery he's such a Swiss Army knife. You can really play him anywhere until at least do a respectable job defensively. I'm with you. I'm not totally sold on Segura at third, but it does seem that that's the route that Girardi is going to go. So now that we're on the topic of second base, we will go with Kingery as that guy. What are your expectations for Scotty Jetpacks this season?
I'm gonna counter what you guys said, and I don't think he'll be at second base when the season starts. I kind of do think he'll be at third. I think the Gene Segura experiment might kind of fall short of what they're hoping for. I'd rather see him at second. There was the Athletic article about him being mentally and physically tired before games because he wasn't really knowing where he was going to play. It was kind of a different spot every other night. And he said it was a toll on him. So I think that's where a lot of the want and need to kind of supplant him at second base is stemming from on Joe Girardi's part and, the organization's part. But I just don't think Gene Segura is going to be able to stick it. He did look really uncomfortable in that first game. I know, not many of the games, unfortunately, have been televised, so it's kind of hard to really see much of him playing the position. But from that first game, he just didn't really know what kind of balls to go after. He kind of looked a little lost. So I don't know. I think it's still up for debate if he'll be starting, if Gene will definitely be at third base. But in terms of projections for Scott Kingery, if there's one thing I hope his strikeout rate goes down because he does strike out a fairly decent amount.
No, I agree with you. He does strike out a good amount in that sense, and that's something I definitely want to see him go down on. And hopefully if he does get that position spot of playing the same day for the majority of the year, it can definitely help him fall into that role and finally again feel comfortable. And I think that could go a long way, honestly, because I think from what I can only imagine is not knowing what position you're going to play can probably take a toll on kind of your whole aspect of how you go out about pregame and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, not only the spot of before the game, but let alone like a position change throughout the game with the amount of double switches we made the last few years. I mean, he would start the game at second, and I feel like he'd end up playing two different positions sometimes just in one game alone. But I think he clearly put in work in the offseason. I mean, just the amount he bulked up is clearly seen. So I think he can make another big step forward. And hopefully another thing besides the strikeouts, which would go along with that because you get more balls in play or put the ball in play more, would be I would like to see his average get up a little higher. And that's something I really think he can do.
Yeah, he was hitting for a pretty high average throughout most of last season. Kind of took a dip at the end a little bit, but compared to his rookie season where he was statistically the worst hitter in baseball, I think that he improved by leaps and bounds last season, which is a hard thing to do given what you guys mentioned, how he was playing all over the place. He was playing out in center field. He was playing third base. He was playing center. He was playing shortstop, second base. He was all over the place on the field, and yet he was able to, for the most part, stay in there in the box, get that average up, show a little bit more power. Strikeouts were still up there. That I agree with you guys. That's a thing that he needs to get down, but he's a young player. He showed a lot of promise to me last season. I think that he's just going to continue to improve. Hasn't hit the ball like Reese. He hasn't hit the ball particularly well so far in spring training. He does have a home run, but once again, it's spring training. The guys are just working out the kinks. I expect Scott Kingery to have once again a vastly improved season this year, and he's still going to have the best damn lettuce on the team.
but I was just looking at some of his numbers, and he played 50.
I'm sorry, I'm still laughing at the comment.
He played 57 games in center, 37 in third, 12 at short, 6 at second, and then 3 in left field. Those are different numbers from where he started games at, not finished, just started.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty much the Gabe Kapler era in a nutshell. With guys playing all over the place, guys playing out of position. Remember Carlos Santana playing third base for a little while. We do not have Gabe Kapler. Yeah, well, that's the biggest one right there. But we do not have Gabe Kapler managing this team anymore. Thank God. Sorry, Shane, I knew you were a Kapler guy. Yeah, we've got Joe Berardi now. I don't think he's going to be nearly as volatile when it comes to changing up positions like that. I think he's more dead set on having guys play one position, maybe two if they need to, but having one position where they kind of zero in at. And I think that's going to be very beneficial to Scott Kingery this upcoming year. All right, so moving on now to shortstop. And we've got the knighted man, Sir Didi Gregorius, his first season as a Philly. Played previously under Joe Girardi, second go-round in that regard. So far in spring training, though, hitless in 12 at-bats. What do you guys think is going to be, I guess, a storyline for Didi's first season as a Philadelphia Philly?
I think he's going to be exactly the kind of player he was prior to his injury-plagued last season. I think he's going to be a 260 to maybe, if like a higher 270. I couldn't see it being much higher than that. On base percentage, in the 310s, 320 range, and about 25 home runs. I think he'll find a comfortable setting hitting in Citizens Bank Park. It's kind of got the short right field, very similar to Yankee Stadium. And one thing I really expect him to do is I expect him to, very similar to what he did with the Yankees, and get the big hit. I feel like whenever, like he was never the biggest hitter on any of those Yankees team in recent years, with all the guys they have, like Stanton, Judge, just, to name two of the many Goliaths that they have. But whenever if you watch highlights, like the Yankee, when he hit the home run in the playoffs, like he's just so
Cleveland.
electric. Yeah, he's just so electric, and he's so much fun to watch. He kind of reminds me of Andrew McCutchen with his personality. I think he's a good guy to have. I think he keeps things, fun and engaging and refreshing for the guys. So I think he'll be good, if not better, especially because he is on a 1-year deal. He does have to play for his next contract, and I think that'll motivate him. I think he'll be really good. I'm excited.
Andrew, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. I liked Didi from when he was the Yankees, and I think that's going to really help him. I think it's going to help him and the team as he's coming into a new place, but he's coming to a new place with a manager he's very comfortable with. I think I know it's only a 2-year span and he was hurt last year, but Just looking at his average, it dipped so much when he lost Girardi. When he had Girardi, he kept improving, and then he loses Girardi in 17, and his average goes down from 287 to 268, then down to 238. So I do believe coaches can help certain players like that, and let alone I think it's going to be good for the team for him to come in, and he can help some of the guys that don't know Girardi, kind of help them get comfortable to his manager style.
Right.
So I think he can be a great leader as well and I think being in Citizens Bank Park, I think as long as he stays healthy, I think he'll put up, like you said, at least 25 home runs, and then he'll hit for the about 80 to 85 RBI range, and I think it's going to be a tremendous thing for this team.
Yeah, as far as the type of contact that Didi makes, he's very similar to Chase Utley in that he's not your prototypical power hitter who launches, the high arcing fly ball home runs. He hits those line drives that sneak out over the right field fence. And he was able to take advantage of the short porch at Yankee Stadium. It's a little bit deeper at Citizens Bank Park, but the ball does travel well to right field. So I think that he's going to benefit from that. I think the average is going to go up a little bit. I think that the Phillies benefit from the fact that he's in a prove-it season because he wants to go out there and he wants to earn a long-term contract. He wants to earn a big payday after this season. So they did a good job of getting him on that one-year deal, that one-year prove-it deal. And now the onus is on him to go out there and perform and earn that paycheck. And I think that he's going to be a motivated guy. He's going to go out there and get the job done. And if he struggles a little bit, like you both alluded to, Girardi is a guy who's familiar with him. He knows how to get through to him. He knows how to get the most out of Sir Didi. I'm expecting maybe not a huge season from him, but something at least respectable, somewhere in the ballpark of about 260, 265. Maybe he puts up 20 home runs. I think the biggest thing that I'm expecting from Didi is that clutch factor. You guys mentioned how big he's been in the playoffs for the Yankees in years past. I think that he's going to be that guy who, along with Bryce Harper, the Phillies want those guys up at the plate with the game on the line in the bottom of the ninth inning, bottom of the 10th, whatever it may be, extra innings, a big situation. You're going to want Sir Didi at the plate, and I think that he's going to come through for them on numerous occasions this year. All right, so we will move on now to third base. And so since we went with Kingery at second, we will go with Gene Segura at third base. How you guys feeling about Segura this year?
I'm all in on mean, lean Gene. I think he's going to have
Gene. I like it.
I think he's going to have a good year. I think, he had a lot of personal stuff going on last season, obviously notables being the passing of his grandmother, who I believe he was really close with. Also, the Andrew McCutchen injury. A lot of people really did blame him for that, and I think he kind of, he took that responsibility and he kind of put it really on himself. I think he was a bit too hard on himself. I'm not saying he's going to have like a career year or an MVP type like season, but I'd expect his batting average to go back up. I expect his on base percentage to go up about 20 points. I think another problem with Gene last year was our hitting coach and the coaching staff. I think they emphasize kind of pulling the ball too much with him, if that makes sense. Maybe trying to have a little bit more of a power stroke rather than what his more traditional approach is. Of being a kind of a slap hitter. So I think kind of going back to his style of ball will benefit him. He isn't going to be doing things that he shouldn't be told to do. I think he's going to have a great year, and it's going to make for some pretty interesting storylines when Alec Boehm's ready to play, because what are they going to do with all these infielders?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's an interesting thought there. It'll certainly be interesting to see what they do, definitely at the deadline, if there's guys that they want to move around. But in the meantime, we'll see what these guys can put out there. Andrew, how are you feeling about Segura this year?
I'm really excited. As you mentioned, Joe, I think it's been last year was in multiple ways was a tough year on him from personally, and then even he had to deal with that ankle injury for a lot of the year, and I really think that affected him. And like you even mentioned, the coaching change in terms of hitting coach, I think, again, they were so set on drawing out at bats and trying to get the walks. But to me, Gene Segura's always lived off being an aggressive hitter, trying to attack the ball early, like you said, a slap kind of hitter. And I think that really takes a toll on some players and trying to just change. Like these guys have been playing the same way for a while now, and especially a guy who's been playing since I think he's been playing since like 2012, 2013 ish. So I mean, you're playing for 6 years in the majors, and you're hitting the ball this way, and all of a sudden you go to a new team, not only a new team but a new city, but that you got to adjust to the new style. So I think going back to Joe Dillon, which I really like that hire, and I think it's going to be a great setup for the way that he can help Gene get back to the way he was. And like you said, I think his average is going to go up. I think he'll get closer to 300 again. And I've always been a Segura fan, so maybe I'm being a little biased, but I think we're really going to get the old Gene back in terms of hitting, and hopefully the position change won't hurt him too much.
Boy, I hope you're right about that. I would love to see the first half of 2019 Gene Segura make a comeback this year. You guys mentioned that he went through some issues last year, both on and off the field. Another thing that he actually, I believe, alluded to recently is the fact that after McCutchen went down, the whole play where he didn't run out the pop fly and McCutchen got caught in a rundown and blew out his knee. Segura admitted that he felt, I don't know if it was guilt, but he felt like he was responsible for that. And he said that weighed on him throughout the rest of last season. So hopefully from that, his mind is clear. He had a whole offseason to kind of mentally get right and refocus on baseball. And it's no coincidence now that he was playing so well throughout the beginning of the season. And then really after that happened, McCutchen went down. It's a combination of McCutchen not being in the lineup and also maybe the mental aspect of it for Segura, that his play went down after that. He wasn't hitting the ball as well, and it showed. I think that having McCutchen back in the lineup, whether it be after the first week or 2 weeks into the season, we know he's not going to start opening day, but just having him back in the lineup, having him healthy, that'll help Segura, as well as just having an offseason to kind of clear his mind and get his mind right. Because when he's playing well, we saw at the beginning of last year, he was hitting north of 350 for the first couple of months. And he was doing everything. He is hitting for extra bases. He had a couple home runs in there. He was able to slap the ball the other way and pick up some kind of cheap singles where he was able to just bloop the ball over like the first baseman's head or something like that. But whatever it was, he was making great contact. He was getting on base, and the Phillies offense was a well-oiled machine when he was. So I'm hopeful, Andrew, that he can come through like you seem to think that he'll be able to. And if he does, the Phillies offense is going to be dangerous because of it.
Yeah, and just one quick point about you mentioned since the McCutchen injury, when McCutchen went down, he was hitting right around 300, and then in the next 2 weeks, just in that span, his average went down from about right around 300 all the way down to 268, and just in the span of June 1st to June 23rd, just in that span, it dropped that much. And so I think, and that's before he started picking it back up. So I think that clearly shows how much of an impact that injury McCutchen had really could have played on him.
Yeah, and that happened in June. It's not like it was the beginning of the season where averages can be a little bit more volatile just based on one or two bad games. That's like 3 straight weeks of bad games dropping that average right there. So that's a good point that you brought up. So now we're finished with the infield. We'll move on to the outfield, and we will start with the $300 million man out in right field. Mr. Bryce Harper had a poor start to the season last year. Well, I should say he had a great start in the opening series, really cooled off after that, but then absolutely caught fire in the second half and was one of the best players in baseball in the second half of the season. How do you see Bryce's second season in Philadelphia going this year?
Our Lord and Savior Bryce Harper. I think it'll be a good year. I think it will be a slight improvement from the 2019 season he had, which, as you mentioned, slow start, but really went off in the second half and really made the entire year worthwhile. I think he's going to be, just as exciting, just as refreshing and fun to watch as he was. I think the average could creep up a little bit, maybe 10 to 15 points. 270s, which for Bryce Harper, that's fine. I'd love to see the power numbers go up as well. I'd love to see him hit 40 home runs. I feel like it's been, been nearly over a decade since we've seen a Phillies player hit over 40 home runs. I think the last time a Philly player did that was like Ryan Howard 09 maybe. So it's been
Yeah, I
quite
think you're
some
right
time.
about that.
It's been quite some time, so I'd love to see that happen. Just because nothing's more beautiful than a shot to right field in Citizens Bank Park by a left-handed power bat, who also has a beautiful head of hair. So
Second best lettuce on the team.
Yes. I expect him to have a really good year. I think it'll be good. I think, he's more settled. I think last year, he had a lot of off the field things going on, obviously getting acclimated to the city, not only just getting acclimated to the city, but he signed in, late February. So there was a lot of, not a lot of time for him to really get acclimated to the environment. He also was having a child. He was also moving. The list just kind of goes on. And on top of all of that, he still had a pretty good year. So I just expect things to get better. I like to compare it to Cole Hamels when he had that, really out of pocket year in 2009. He was infamous for making the comments that he really didn't want to be in the World Series. He just wanted the season to be over at that point because he was, I guess, just disappointed with himself in the year he was having. And I think, after that year, once he had a clear, mind, he didn't have many things going on in his life. I believe very similar to Bryce, he was having a baby that year. He returned back to form, and I think that's something you could look for Bryce, and he'll just get better than what he was.
Andrew, what do you got?
Yeah, I think, we've already touched on it, but I think a big thing here is, again, he's starting the year in Philly. I think last year he was excited to be in a new town. He saw how much appreciation he got, and I think he really felt like he had to live up to all this expectation stuff. And I think he really, really, really tried to do way too much in the beginning of the year, and it really kind of affected him. I think you saw it with the strikeouts. And that's the one thing. You mentioned power. I'd like to see more home runs because I think he can hit 40 in Citizens Bank Park. But I think the big thing with him, I think I'd like to see his strikeout numbers go down a little bit. I forget how high he was in the league, but I think he was up near the top in most strikeouts in the league. So I think that's a spot I'd like to see him go down a little bit. And I think that will come with, again, being acclimated with the city already. He'll have a full year of spring training rather than kind of just signing, a year ago, yesterday or the day before or something like that. And so I think that's going to go a long way with him, and I think if he gets those strikeout numbers down, I think that's going to help his average go up. I think he'll turn into a little more home runs and, again, more RBIs too, which will be tough to do because he had a career amount of RBIs last year. So I think that's going to be a big thing. But I think, honestly, I think it's going to be around 35 to 40 home runs again. Like you said, I think I can agree with 10 points in his average. I think he'll be around 270, and I think he does cut the strikeout numbers down. And I hope he still bows to the fans before each game. I think that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, let's keep that up. Another question I got about Harper: does he change his bandana now that we have the new look fanatic out there?
I think you'll see a new bandana. I know he's been rocking the one with his baby's name on it. The crew bandana.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
But even if it's not the fanatic, if it's just the crew one, he's gonna be rocking a bandana. I think that was a look that really took off for the Phillies merchandise wise. Like, I look horrendous in it, but I even have one of the bandanas. I think they're so cool. So
That's awesome.
It worked. It sold. He as we talked about with the hair, he rocks it. So keep up the style. I think what he's doing, growing out his hair. He's got the long a la Jason Worth look going, the real scruffy man look. I'm a fan of it. Rock it. I'm looking for more bandanas.
It's funny because Worth left Philly to take the money in D.C. and Harper left D.C. to take the money in Philly. So there are a couple parallels there between him and Jason Worth, but Harper, much better player than Jason Worth ever was. Not to say that Worth was ever a bad baseball player. He did lots of great things, helped us win a World Series in 2008. But I was on record the first time that I was on the show, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago with Shane, I said that this is going to be Harper's first career 50 home run season. And that's a bold prediction, I know. But I just want it on record that I'm sticking with that. I think that he's going to come out and he's going to not get off to a slow start the way that he did last season. You know, you guys mentioned it. He had a lot weighing on him. Obviously, had just been married. He was welcoming a child into the world, moving to a new city, signing that big $300 million contract. A lot of lifetime firsts for him and a lot of new scenery for him as well. And that can be hard for a person to adjust to. So it's perfectly understandable why he was, after that great series against Atlanta, kind of a slow start for him. But he really picked it up. I think that in the second half of the season, we saw the Bryce Harper that we're going to see throughout the rest of his tenure here. As I said, he was one of the best players in baseball. I expect him not just to hit 50 home runs this year, I also expect him to be right in the thick of the MVP race throughout the course of the season. Maybe not winning it, but probably being a top 2 or 3 guy in the National League. I'm really expecting big things from him this year, and the Phillies are going to remain in the thick of the playoff race. I think they may even snag a wild card spot, and he's going to be the reason why they do that.
All I'm saying is if Bryce Harper hits 50 home runs and he does not win the MVP, I will riot.
Hey, I'll join you.
Obviously, I don't think he'll hit 50 home runs. God, if he would, though, that would be so wonderful. I think there's a chance he's in the MVP race, though. I think he could be right in the thick of it. I think one thing that I like about this team is that they are going in with the chip on your shoulder mentality, whereas obviously the projections mean nothing at this point, but the PECOTA projections came out and projected the Phillies to win less than 80 games, finish 4th in division. Obviously not good things we want to hear for a team that's trying to break a 8 or 9 year playoff drought. So I think this team is talented, and the fact that they were kind of, lowballed, projected not to finish very well. I think that's going to play up in a lot of these guys' drive to really produce well. And I think Harper's one of those guys that's going to use it to fuel them. So I expect good things.
You know what I have to say about the PECOTA projections? They're named after a guy who had a career batting average of 249 and 22 home runs in his whole entire career. And he played for 8 years in the major leagues. So that's what I have to say about PECOTA projections.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
But on the topic of Harper, I just want to say when he hits a home run, he hit some majestic bombs last year.
They're not cheap shots.
No, these are some absolute piss missiles that he hit last year. I remember that one that he hit against San Francisco that went all the way out into McCovey Cove out there, and I think they listed it. I think they listed it at about 465 or something like that. And I swear to God, they robbed Harper there because that ball was at least 490, maybe even 500 feet.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like I said, he doesn't hit a cheap home run. In my free time, so I never was one to usually watch baseball film. I wouldn't go back and watch highlights. I found myself so many times this offseason and throughout the fall and winter just going on looking at Bryce Harper home runs, Zach Wheeler. When they signed Wheeler, I watched a lot of YouTube clips about him, Nola. But with Bryce, it's just man, first home run he hit at Citizens Bank Park was a bomb. The most famous of all, the grand slam against Chicago. It's never a cheap shot. It's never one that just goes right over. He absolutely just drills it over, and it's a thrill. It's exciting to watch.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, I think we're going to see at least 50 of those this upcoming season. So hopefully,
Amen to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Bryce, the onus is on you now. 50 home runs, you've got to make me right here. I'm counting on you.
Bryce, if you're listening, what's up, man?
We all know that he listens to us. Come on. We're only the best Phillies podcast out there. He definitely listens to us. All right, so moving on to center field, and a guy who is projected to actually start the season in left field with a McCutcheon injury, but I think he's probably going to be our starting center fielder throughout the majority of the season. Adam Hazley, how you guys feeling about him?
He's looked good defensively. That's one of the things I noted today. I think he's looked very good in the outfield, even dating back to his regular season time last season. He looks like he can stick it at every day in center field, which is good. The Phillies have not been the most defensively savvy team in the last couple of years. Obviously, they were step up last year from what they were in 2018. But I think just having an actual center fielder playing the position is beneficial. Now, offense-wise, I really don't know what to expect. I may be somewhere batting average-wise in the 260s, maybe 240s at the bare lowest. I don't know what to really expect on base percentage-wise. Something over the threes, I hope. I'm not as bullish on him as I am other players. If you ask for me, my opinion personally, I'd rather see Roman Quinn start the season there.
Yeah, it's funny you say it because I'm actually a big Roman Quinn fan, so
I love Roman Quinn.
I would love to see them give him a chance while he's healthy. I know it's the big issue if he can stay healthy, but if he can perform and play well, I would really like Quinn there to at least get a good shot of maybe platooning for a little bit. But as far as Adam Hazley goes, I think a big thing with him is going to be the month of April. And I know it probably goes without saying, but I think the reason why I say that is I was surprised with how well he was able. I know 266 isn't exactly what you want, but I think I was very surprised with how well he was able to adjust to the MLB after getting off to a slow start. I really think he started to found some pretty good rhythm by the end of the year. And like you said, he was a very good defender. But I really think his offense started to come along at the end of the year. So I think now with the full off season of other teams and pitchers being able to adjust, I think April will be a big month for him because I could see him kind of getting off to a slow start with how the pitchers adjust. So I think it's going to be really important to see how he kind of goes about the rest of spring training and how he's able to adjust in April. And I think that's going to be the key to his season is able to make an early adjustment and find out how they're pitching to him. And I think that'll go a long way for him.
Yeah, so you guys are a little bit more, I don't want to say down on Hazley because I don't think either of you are down on Hazley, but you're certainly not as up on Hazley as I am. I'm a big Hazley guy. Shane knows that. I've been a Hazley guy pretty much ever since they drafted him. Defensively, he is adequate. I'd say above average out there in center field. Offensively, you're not going to get a whole lot of power from him. You might get some sneaky pop just from the contact he makes some balls carrying out. Maybe 15-ish home runs if he plays a full season. I think what's going to be the big thing for Hazley, not just this season, but throughout the course of his career, is his ability to make contact. He's a very good contact hitter. I could see him, maybe not this season as he's still getting acclimated to the major leagues. I think maybe this season he hits closer to 275-ish, but I think that in future years we could see him be that guy who sniffs, the 290 to 300 range. And it won't be a Cesar Hernandez / Ben Revere 290 to 300, where it's just completely empty, useless single after single. He's a guy who can hit to the gaps. He can get those extra base hits. He can get those doubles, triples here and there. Like I said, he's not going to have a whole lot of power, but offensively, the contact is going to be there. The extra base hits will be there. I like what he brings to this team from an offensive standpoint. So I'm pretty high on Adam Hazley going into this season.
And I think the thing with me is I'm not trying to sound down on him. I think I'm just a big Roman Quinn fan, and I think there's just a hope in me that he can somehow find a way to stay healthy and it pan out for him. So I think it's more just how high I am on Roman Quinn more than I'm trying not to be down on Hazley. So I think it'll be interesting. But like you said, with him probably starting in left field with the McCutcheon injury, I think they'll both get some pretty good playing time to start the year. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they both kind of start the year.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And for the record, I'm with you on Roman Quinn. I like him as a player. I like what he brings in terms of the speed, and offensively, he's got a little bit more power than most people assumed that he had, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit. He actually hit an upper tank, opposite field upper deck home run at Citizens Bank Park last year, which I kind of went crazy over at the time. But yeah, Roman Quinn's a nice player. I like having him on this team, and he will certainly give Adam Hazley a good fight for that center field position once McCutchen comes back. All right, so speaking of McCutchen, since he will be the starting left fielder once he does come back, let's talk about him a little bit. How you guys feeling about a healthy Andrew McCutchen this year?
I was completely at one point, like, we'll have Andrew McCutchen back. He's going to be just as productive as he was last season before he got injured. But I think reality kind of set in a little bit. Obviously, there was the news earlier in the week or late last week that he, was not going to be ready for opening day. I think that was kind of becoming more of the writing on the wall within the last couple weeks, and it was just announced recently. I think there could be a situation where he comes back ready to go and performing up to par, what it is at least expected of him. But I also think there's a situation where he might be struggling. He isn't the Andrew McCutchen of old, with the 5-tool ability to do it all around the baseball field. He's older, coming off a nearly year-long injury. I do think that he is someone who is just such a brilliant baseball mind, and how he, prepares himself, how seriously he takes the game, how dedicated he is to his craft. So I do think if there's anyone like in similar circumstances who goes through what Andrew McCutchen goes through and can come back from it, I think it's him. I don't know if it'll be as spectacular as the start he had last season when, through the beginning of June, he was easily one of the highest performing players on the team, and if not one of the best in the league. I think if he finished a full season, he would have hit around, what he was projected to hit around was like 27 home runs. But if you told me that's what we were going to get out of Andrew McCutchen when we signed him, I probably wouldn't have believed you. So he was really good, and it would be so good to get that back. I'm a little skeptical, but I think he could work it out and get back on track pretty quickly.
All right, Andrew, how are you feeling about Kutch this year?
I'm feeling pretty good. I think he's been good at making. I think a big thing that's kind of helped him in his career is the way he's been able to adjust to different situations. So I think this is going to be a big adjustment for him. I believe after he had the injury, he said it felt similar to something that's happened to him before. So I think that also might be able to help him in the sense of he kind of knows what it's going to feel like getting back out there on the field. I think he will start a little slow, kind of again just getting adjusted to everything. But I think if you just look at his numbers throughout his career, I think as he kind of aged on, you kind of see his average kind of dip down. But as his average dips down, his on-base percentage doesn't take as big of a dip down. So I think he's kind of realizing he might not get as many hits as he usually does, but he's able to adjust his game to where he's going to draw out walks. And he's I think when he got hurt, he was top. I think he was the leader in walks. Definitely top 5, and then also top there in runs scored. So I think he's able to, and he's not the fastest guy, but again, I think he's so good at making that adjustment he knows how to run the bases. He knows how to get on without getting the hit. So I think, again, he's going to start slow, but I think eventually, after a few weeks, he'll get back into the McCutchen he was last year. And they never really said how much time he's going to miss. So I think it's kind of tough to put kind of numbers on him for what he's going to finish this year. But I think I'm going to feel pretty comfortable and confident if he comes back after a few weeks. I think he can kind of get back into that leadoff hitter as he was last year.
Yeah, that would be ideal, obviously, for the Phillies if he could do that. I'm not entirely certain what to expect from this year. The ACL is such a tough injury to come back from. You did mention that he is familiar with it. I think he tore his ACL when he was in high school, if I am correct about that. So he does have some familiarity. I can't talk. Familiarity with it. There it is. Took long enough there. So he does know what needs to go into rehabbing from this type of injury. But the first time it happened, he was a teenager. He was in high school. This time he's a guy he's in his 30s. His body isn't what it used to be. It's starting to break down a little bit. And I don't know. I think that with that being said, he is the kind of guy who takes great care of himself, keeps himself in great shape, has been going full on with the rehab throughout the offseason, trying to get himself ready. He was trying to be ready for opening day. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But I think that the ACL shouldn't affect him too much once he does come back. As far as once he is fully healthy, I think we've seen a little bit of a dip in his play since he left Pittsburgh. Obviously, that was peak McCutcheon out there, a guy who's in the MVP race year after year. He's not quite that guy anymore. He's still a very effective baseball player. We saw that when he was healthy with the Phillies last year. Average was a little bit down, but the power numbers were up. The on-base percentage was still there. Still doing a lot of great things. A huge defensive upgrade over what we had previously in Rhys Hoskins out there in left field. He's a really important member of this team, and once he comes back, I think it's going to be hugely beneficial to the Phillies. Just not just because of what he provides on the field, but because of the leadership that he provides off the field as well. All right, and so now that we have covered the starting position players, Andrew, I believe you brought up that you wanted to talk about some of the guys who are fighting for those last bench positions for the Phillies. And who do you got in that fight right now?
So far, I just think this is going to be a big thing because I think this is just an area the Phillies have lacked a lot in the previous years, and it's kind of hurt them. Right now, I'm loving Logan Forsythe. I think he's off to a tremendous start, and I think he's definitely one of my favorites to win the spot. And I think he's got off to a tremendous spring training, and he's someone I really want to see carry that into the season. I think Jay Bruce will probably be a lock, and with Roman Quinn's versatility, I think he'll be a lock, especially with the McCutcheon injury already. And then another guy, I think, again, with him being a previous Joe Torre guy, and I think he's off to a good start, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name. The guy that used to play for him at the Yankees, I think it was Torres or something along those lines. Yeah, Torres. Is it
Ronald Torres?
Yeah, Ronald Torres. Yeah, I think he's been a tremendous player so far. I think he'd get an edge, but so I go with those two guys, and it depends on what they go, whether they want to go with the 4 or 5 man bench. So I think those two guys would be my favorites, along with I think Josh Harrison's been a close guy out there as well.
Yeah, I think Josh Harrison and Logan Forsythe, it'll be either of them to kind of nab up one of those final spots. I think you brought up a great point that this is something that the Phillies have had how many times did you roll your eyes when you saw Sean Rodriguez's name in the lineup?
Oh my God, man!
Wasn't he just the worst? I'm sorry,
God.
Not to
especially
go
after those comments that he made.
Yeah, and look, whatever, dude. I get it. Like you know, you don't want to be booed every other night. That's fine, but you literally suck, man. Like you suck. You're not a good ball player. Like, I don't mean to pop off, but like, it was just horrendous watching him play baseball. And the fact that they have competent players, the fact that they have a former all-star in camp in Harrison, it's just better. It's just better. And those, when we have those situations when we need to call up someone from the bench, you're going to see someone like Josh Harrison or someone like Forsythe instead of someone like, Andrew Knapp, who still will make the team. But I think with the new expanded roster, his role kind of as a pinch hitter in certain situations is going to be diminished because you have more options and you also have better options. So I think it can go either way with the last couple of bench spots. I agree with you. I think Jay Bruce is like the only real lock in the top of my off the top of my head. Obviously Roman Quinn and Knapp as well. But the fact that they just have options is what really is what I'm most excited about.
It's refreshing, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Finally got some bench options.
I hated Sean Rodriguez.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody did.
I think it's funny. Just a quick side note. I think it's funny the different players that are able to take like certain criticism compared to other guys. And I know their talent wise are different, but like just the way and you even see with the way the fans treat him. I mean, Embiid kind of did the same thing, in a little way, and kind of calling the fans out at some point. But we even booed him to the next game when he got introduced and stuff. But he's able to take that, and he understands that that's what's going to happen in a big city. Where Sean Rodriguez, he takes that like so deep down, and he took it so personally, which it's just funny the way that different guys take that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Rob. One guy is Joel Embiid, who I'm not a basketball fan, but to me, Joel Embiid's a superstar. Especially, at least in the city of Philadelphia, I would consider him one of the top 5 athletes out of the, 4 major sports in the city of Philly. And the other guy, Sean Rodriguez.
Who?
Exactly, exactly my point. But I agree with you. I just think he kind of took it way out of context. It was a very frustrating season. There were a lot of things that were making the fans very unhappy. And I just think he fueled that fire of on top of, not being able to put together a competent roster after an off season of spending nearly $500 million. We still had to, sit through a situation where we had to watch, someone as awful as Sean Rodriguez, who at one point in so many pinch hit appearances was 1 for 25, I believe. So, like I said, I'm just happy that part of our lives is over.
Yeah, I think we're all so happy to see Sean Rodriguez not wearing the Phillies pinstripes anymore. But as far as the 2 guys who I think are going to round off the Phillies bench, I agree with you guys. And Logan Forsythe, he's had a really nice spring so far, a pair of homers, 5 hits and 11 at-bats. But not just that, he's a guy who's been around the block a few times with a number of different major league teams. He's been in some playoff baseball before. He's come up with some big hits throughout his career. I don't really know much about him as far as what he does defensively, but I do know that offensively he's been a pretty consistent guy throughout the course of his career. Good bench piece. I like him. I was thinking about Josh Harrison, and he had some nice years out in Pittsburgh, was a very good player, as you guys mentioned, an all-star at one point. I just think that while he still might be a nice player, not quite there to the level the Phillies may need him to be. So for that second guy, I'm actually going to go with another offseason acquisition, and Kyle Garlick coming over from the LA Dodgers has had a nice spring so far, 4 hits and 11 at-bats. He's got some good pop, can play both corner outfield positions. I think that what he brings, especially at the plate, is something that could be very valuable to the Phillies. So I like Kyle Garlick's chances of making the team to start the season.
He's someone who I've seen a lot of things written about him on Twitter. He seems to be having a really good spring, which is what you want to see. And I think that he's someone, if there's an injury to anyone on the bench, he is someone that could be brought up in a pinch and contribute to a level up to expectation. I just think with, you already have Roman Quinn. He's probably going to make the roster. Jay Bruce as well. I don't know if they'll carry many bench outfielders. They could also use, I think Logan Forsythe, correct me if I'm wrong, but he could play both the infield and the outfield as well. So he's another person who could get time out there. I just think the outfield pool is really crowded. You also have guys like, oh my gosh, Nick Williams. I don't think he'll get, I don't think he'll make the roster, but he's another person who's kind of in that hunt as well. So I think Garlick won't make it. I think he's someone who will start down in the minors and in a situation where Jay Bruce or if Roman Quinn goes down in another injury, I think he's someone who could be brought up.
It's funny you mentioned Nick Williams. I went the whole entire offseason up until the start of spring training, and I don't know why it was. I went the whole entire offseason for some reason thinking that he was no longer a Philly.
Yeah, he and it's really crazy because he had the pretty, solid year in 2018 when he was, brought up with the Phillies. I believe he played in about maybe a little less than 100 games, and he played really rather well. Obviously, he had that inside the park 3-run home run on the last game of the season, and the Phillies, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, blew out the Mets that game. And he was one of the, had a couple big hits that game, kind of had a little curtain call with the crowd. Everyone got real rowdy. And even in his 2019, I didn't think, or excuse me, his 20. I said he was brought up in 27. When he was brought up in 2017, correct me, he had a pretty solid year. 2018, he was okay. But I just think after signing Kutch and signing Harper and where are you going to play him? You had Odubel still at the time before all of his nonsense. And now it's just like, where do you play him? He doesn't really have a role. He's not very good defensively. The bat's okay. I think he still strikes out a lot. He should have been traded after the 2018 season when he still had a little bit of value. But after last year, you can't really even trade him for pennies at this point. I don't know where he stands with the organization. I really don't.
Yeah, and him and Kapler didn't exactly see eye to eye. In fact, Kapler ran his ass all the way over to San Francisco before he grew the balls to say that Nick Williams is a terrible baseball player.
No,
Gosh.
I think that's fine too, because I don't remember exactly what he said, but Nick Williams kind of took a small shot at Kapler as well. Right before spring training started, I think I remember seeing an article that he kind of mentioned how much Kapler was too much by the numbers rather than actually seeing talent. I don't remember exactly what it was word for word, but I think that's a good paraphrase of it. But real quick, going off, I like Garlick as well, and I think he'll win the job with McCutchen going down. So I think you'll carry you'll carry an extra outfielder there, especially with the extra roster spot this year. So I think Garlick will definitely make it with McCutchen missing the start of the season. I think he's been your best outfielder in that sense from spring training for the extra guy. So I'll be interested to see how well of a start he can get off to see if he can continue to win that position. But I think the other funny part about Nick Williams, I don't know if you guys saw this the other day, but it was right after, I think, the first day of full workouts. He said he was looking around the field and he realized he's the only player left from that Cole Hamels trade that brought in, 6 or 7 guys?
Oh, my gosh.
That's wild.
And he's the only guy left, and even he won't pan out. We got 6 or 7 guys, and none of these guys are going to pan out.
Right.
Hey, Andrew. Jorge Alfaro did get us JT Realmuto, so.
So,
That is
yeah,
true.
indirectly, Cole Hamels did lead to BCIB.
Yeah, so we can't complain with that. It's, that hard throwing ability that Jorge Alfaro has that attracted the Mets so much to wanting to strike a deal with us.
All right, so let's get into some predictions here, and Andrew, we'll start with you for this one. Just a couple, any kind of prediction that you have for any of the Phillies or the team as a whole this upcoming season.
I'd say I think, again, we already talked about the hitters. I think my biggest concern with this team is going to be the pitching staff. I was really disappointed with them not really going after any relievers because I think that's been a big struggle the last few years. And I think it's going to continue to hurt this team. And unless if they finally bring in a different reliever, maybe at the deadline or something, my prediction for the team is going to be just missing the playoffs, the outside looking in, and I think they win about 85 to 86 games, but I think with the pitching here, it's really going to hurt them.
So no wild card even.
I think they'll fight for it, but I think when it's all said and done, I think just with what's around, I really like what the Reds did this offseason. I'm kind of high on them. I think obviously you're going to have the Dodgers win the West, and I think a couple of those teams are going to be fighting. I think there's just a lot of other good, solid teams that have a good mix of offense and pitching. And I think the Braves win the division, and then I think the Nationals, Mets, and Phillies are kind of almost going to be on a even playing field. And I think I think some of their pitching just gives them the edge just over the Phillies right now, unless if the Phillies can make a move at some point.
Fair enough. You got any other predictions you want to throw out there?
I think I'll stay. I think Klentak's spot will be on the line, so I think we will see a big deadline move this year compared to other years.
All right. Well, we'll stay tuned and see if that happens. Joe, you got any predictions for us?
I got a few. I really like the one about Klentak. Obviously, if the team's in a very disastrous place where they're not competing whatsoever. Not even like last year where they were still struggling, but still in it for a good majority of the season. I think if they tank completely, they won't do anything major. And if they do anything, they're going to try doing some selling of a couple guys. But I think I think they'll get to the playoffs. I think
Wild card or division winner?
Oh God, I want to say division winner so bad, but I'm just not going to say it. I will say it's possible. I believe in literally I think baseball is such a hard sport to predict. Um, I think it could go either way. They could have a beautiful season, win the division. I could see them having a situation where they make one of the wild card spots, which I think is the most likely situation. But I could also see situations where they tank and are completely horrible. So it's really hard to kind of sit right now with what I'm seeing in spring training and just what you're hearing, what you're seeing other teams do. As Andrew mentioned, teams like the Reds, the Diamondbacks were kind of good last year. The Mets took a step up. They finished ahead of us in the division, got really hot towards the end of the season. There's competition, specifically within the division. Like I don't need to sit here and tell you guys how competitive our division is with 4 teams that could potentially win the division. But I think most likely scenario is a wild card spot. I think the bullpen will be serviceable enough. I think you're going to see a lot of good bounce back showings from a lot of those guys. I do think the rotation's going to be the biggest E in the terms of it's going to be definitely a little sketchy, I guess would be the right word. Obviously, I expect big things from Nola and Zach Wheeler. Jake Arrieta, some people are high on him. I am not. I do. My one prediction that I did write down, I do expect after years of horridness, one of either Nick Pivetta or Vince Velasquez will make a serviceable step forward. I think both of these guys are in a position where if they're not producing in the roles that they are put in by the end of spring training by some point in the regular season, I think this is it. I think this will be their last year. Especially with, Jake Arrieta coming off of the books. You do have Spencer Howard, so he'll be one of the 3 arms in the rotation. There is still the contract to JT that you got to take into consideration. But if they have a little more money flexibility to spend next offseason, I could see them making a move for another starter. I think that could be the big acquisition over next year's offseason for the Phillies, or that might be their midseason acquisition.
So you guys both mentioned potential trade deadline activity for the Phillies, really because of Matt Klentak and his future with the team. My bold prediction, I already said that Harper's going to hit 50-plus home runs, so I can't go with that one again. I'm going to go with Aaron Nola picking up at least 17 wins this year. I'm going to set the number at 17. I don't think he quite pushes 20, but I think that 17, 18, somewhere in that ballpark. It sounds like a nice number for him. It sounds like a very reachable number for him. I think we're going to see an Aaron Nola that we saw through the middle of last season. It was kind of bookended by a bad beginning to the season and a bad end to the season. Mm-hmm. He actually pitched very well in the middle of the season. And the Aaron Nola that we saw 2 years ago, where he was just excellent from start to finish. I think he's somewhere in the ballpark of between 16 to 18, I'll say 17 wins. And I also think that he posts a sub-3 ERA, somewhere in the maybe 285 to 295 range. So I'm expecting a big bounce back year from the guy who's expected to be our ace. I think he actually is going to pitch like an ace this season, and I think that's going to show in the stat line for Nola.
Oh yeah, he's another one of those guys to me. He's like Bryce. I can watch him play baseball all day. Just how he goes, and he's someone who I think goes about his business so he just takes his craft so seriously. Kind of similar to what I said about McCutchen, how he preps himself for the game, and how seriously he takes the work ethic he puts in. he's someone who I just wish has all the success in life that he strives to get, because I am such an Aaron Nola fan. It's getting a little late. But I agree with you. I think those are reachable numbers. I think it's totally feasible for him to get there. I do hope, now with new pitching coach, I don't know what the situation is going to be with the baseballs this season. I don't know how big of an effect the juice ball had on him, but you can, I guess speculate enough that it had some, type of an impact on him. But just him going back to that normal balance of what he put up in the 2018 and in the middle of the 2019 season, that would be a godsend for this team.
Yeah, absolutely it would be.
Yeah, I hope he's able to do it. I hope he's able to completely bounce back and go back. And I think you saw it at times last year. If you took out, I mean, obviously you can't take him out, but if you took out that April he had was really, really rough, and then I think kind of his last 2 or 3 starts in the regular season last year were really the ones that really killed his ERA. But I think everything kind of mixed in there. You kind of really saw the old Aaron Nola at times, and I'm excited to see what he did in the offseason to get back to that. So I really think he can too, and I think that really helped this team take the next step forward. And I guess one last thing, maybe I know it's not. I don't think it's that bold of a prediction, but I think by season end, I think Sir Anthony Dominguez will steal the closer role from Hector Neris, and that's not a knock against Neris. I think just by the end, as Dominguez kind of gets back into his role, I think he's just better closer type stuff, and Neris really fits the setup role better. So I think by season end, I think Dominguez kind of steals that closer role.
You see, that's an interesting take. I've never been a big Neris guy. In fact, I've had some pretty funny comments about him in the past. But the fact of the matter is, he actually did a pretty damn good job in that closer role last season. He had some frustrating games, games against I think one of them was against the Dodgers, if I stand correct. Another one against the Nationals where he gave up a go-ahead home run with 2 outs in the 9th inning. He's had those games just like he's had throughout the course of his career, but last year they're a little bit fewer and further between. By and large, he did a good job in that closer role, and I'm actually going to say that he maintains that closer role throughout the season. I think that Dominguez will come on as he gets healthier, as he gets back into the swing of things, but I do think that Hector Neris remains the Phillies closer as long as he does not struggle throughout the season.
Do you guys know the timetable on Dominguez? Like, is he going to be ready for opening day? I know he pitched a simulated game. Might have been yesterday or the day before, and there was an article on MLB.com about him saying that he was close to being ready, but I don't know if that means he'll be starting, or if he'll be on the opening day roster, if he'll stay down in the minors a little bit to, hamper to that injury for a little bit longer. Do you guys know anything about that?
As far as I know, I think, like you said, I don't think anyone knows yet. I don't think they have a timetable. Their hope is he's going to be ready for opening day, but I think as far as right now, they're just going to play it day by day and see where he's at. And hopefully he can continue to take strides or take step forwards through the spring training. And I think it all depends on, I guess, when he's able to get back. I think he's close because, like you said, he threw that simulated game. So I think it's all about when he feels comfortable getting onto the actual field. If I had to predict, I'd say because it's the beginning of the year, I think they'd probably played a little more cautious and just kind of start him there on the IL or DL or whatever they call it now. So I think they'll kind of just play cautious just because it is the beginning of the year. So I think he'll start there, but I think he'll be back pretty quick.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Andrew. I think that they are going to be a little bit cautious with it. I think he could be back within the first couple weeks of the open of the season, but probably not for that opening day roster. All right, so real quick before we wrap this thing up here, let's just talk about what made us Philadelphia Phillies fans and a couple of our favorite memories from being Philadelphia Phillies fans. I just want the listeners, to kind of be able to get to know us a little bit more on a personal level and maybe make us a little bit more relatable. So, Andrew, we'll start with you. What made you a Phillies fan, and what are some of your favorite memories?
I'd say first to start, I mean, growing up right outside of Philly, Really definitely helped. My dad was a big fan, so he got me into baseball since I was young. So I think that really had a big factor on it. And I never went away from Philly sports. I grew up going to games. I even now when I'm home, I'm unfortunately out of state now, but when I'm home, I try to go to as many games as possible. I'd say one of my favorite memories, one of my favorite games I've ever been to, was way back when man, I think it was around 2009, 2010, around there. My dad took me and my siblings to the game, and they were playing the Reds that night, and it was early July, so right before 4th of July, and they were down to like 7-1 in the ninth inning, and it was a firework game. So I was honestly probably one of the main reasons why we all stayed there was because of the fireworks after the game. And in the ninth inning, they scored 6 runs, tie it up, and then I think it was Howard hits a walk-off home run in the 10th inning off
Yeah, it was Howard.
hit off Arthur Rhodes. And
Wasn't it Cody fucking Ransom? Cody Ransom,
yes.
who had a two-out, two-run homer to tie the game in the ninth inning.
That's exactly what it was. And that random guy get the home run to tie it and send it into extras, and then Howard walks it off the lefty, and that's a game I will never forget. Just because, again, it's just funny the way things work out. You were down a lot. You had the fireworks after, so that kind of gave us the extra drive to stay for the whole game, and then they just pull off that comeback. So that's a game that's a game I will never forget. And then the last
game.
Oh yeah, it was just a fun time too, and of course we were still good at the time, so the ballpark's all full, which I truly miss the ballpark being full. It just makes it so much better.
Oh, it really does. And talking about the Reds, this place has been a house of horrors for them. I mean, they had that happen to them, blowing that game. I think it was the year before where we dropped 22 runs on them. And then, 2010, that same year is when Doc came in and threw a no-hitter against them, and then we swept them in the playoffs that year. So Citizens Bank Park has been – because I think that same series that you were at, I think the Phillies came back and walked off like all 3 games in that series, if I remember that correctly.
I think you're right. I think I do remember that all being walk-offs. Because I think at that stretch too, I think – if I remember correctly too, not only with those 3 walk-offs, but I think like the first one or the last one of the series before or after was a walk-off too. So I think they did walk off like 4 or 5 straight.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. So, what about you, Joe? How did you end up becoming a Phillies fan, and what are some of your favorite memories?
Speaking about the picking off the park being crowded, I was fortunate to see the Phillies clinch the 2009 NLCS against the Dodgers in, I believe, 5 games. That was probably, and I don't think I'll ever see a game that tops it live. The coolest thing I ever saw in my entire life, at least one of. It's something I still say to my dad, like, thank you for taking me. And at the time, I didn't even realize how much I would appreciate it in the future. But it was just electric, wild, a packed house zoo. Like, none of those words do it justice. There were times the park was literally shaking, and I genuinely thought as a child that it was just going to collapse all around me. That's how insane it was. Manny Ramirez was on the Dodgers at that time, so people actually, I don't know, those tombstones that like people have in front of their house that say RIP with like a skeleton on them.
Yep.
Yes.
People would take that and they would take black confetti and like tape it to the sculpt to make it look like dreads, and they would give it a mustache to kind of make it look like
That's too funny.
Yeah, like I said, it was insane, and they won. And, they're all surrounding each other. They set up the stand. They do, like, the little presentation afterward. I got out of school the next day because I didn't get home till, like, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I think that was a game that brought out my personality because I started talking to, like, I was a kid, but I was talking to strangers, cheering, screaming with them. And I really just embraced the true magic of a Phillies championship. Obviously, they didn't go on to win it all, but I'll never ever forget that night. And
Damn Yankees.
Damn Yankees. And you know what? I'm someone who likes the Yankees, but if only we could have had one more. Like even those players talk about it, like Rollins, Utley, Victorino, Howard. I feel like a lot of them say like they should have won another one in that run. But the fact that they gave us that, 5-year stretch where they played on real baseball, the 2 World Series appearances, winning it once, being in the postseason for all that time, that's really I don't know if we're ever going to see an era of that, good of Phillies baseball. I hope we see it soon, hopefully starting the season, but I just don't think anything will live up to that for quite some time.
Oh my God, man, that was such a fun era of Phillies baseball, and I'm so grateful to have been, around to see that and old enough to understand, the ins and outs of baseball and to be able to enjoy it. That was such a fun time, and yeah, hopefully that does come around soon. We get to see that again. You mentioned that you like the Yankees, and it's funny because I actually like the Yankees too. Because growing up, my family had a vacation home up in the Poconos that we'd go to every weekend throughout the summer. They didn't have Comcast Sportsnet up there, so I couldn't watch the Phillies. So I actually had to watch the ES Network, which had the Yankees games on. But with that being said, I've always been a Phillies fan. Um, I just want to clear that up. I'm not a Yankees fan. I like them, but I am a Phillies guy, which is part of why I'm on this show here. It all started, with my dad taking me to games at the Vet, and we didn't go to a whole lot of games, but when we did, he went all in. He was always getting like the first row seats down the third base side, right up near where all the players are. A field level view of the action. There's nothing better than that. At the Vet, and then the first couple of years at Citizens Bank Park, I think it was up through the 2008 season. My dad and I actually had a partial season ticket plan, and then after they won the World Series, the season ticket prices spiked, and we decided it wasn't in the budget anymore. But yeah, just years of going to Phillies games with my dad. That's really why I became a Phillies fan. As far as one of my favorite memories, I'm going to go post-World Series. I think it was the 2011 season. So after they had won their World Series a couple years before, they were playing against San Francisco, who obviously had knocked them out of the playoffs the year before. And if I remember correctly, I think Vance Worley, it was Vance Worley who was pitching in the game. But the big moment that I remember, Chase Utley hitting an inside-the-park home run. And it was the typical, Chase Utley just busting his ass all the way around the bases. If you watch the replay of it, you can like see him flailing his arms as he rounds their base and just does like this crazy belly flop headfirst dive into home. And once the umpire signaled that he was safe, the crowd just absolutely went nuts. So it was probably the loudest that I've ever heard Citizens Bank Park for a regular season game. So that's one of my favorite memories from being a Phillies fan.
That's awesome. I remember watching that game, but that game was a great game to be. That'd been a great game to be at.
That's was that the same year the Phillies and Giants had that pretty crazy brawl when they
Victorino?
Yeah, Victorino, I think. I remember someone hit Placido Polanco. It was still, the Carlos Ruiz era, but I feel like he wasn't in the game. But I just remember the Giants catcher coming around and like sneaking around like all the action and just blindsiding Placido Polanco, and it incited a pretty epic fight between the two teams. That's another. I like baseball fights. I think
So do
there's
I.
there's so much like they're rare, and I'm kind of okay with that because they're very emotionally driven when they do happen. And I think you're going to see a lot of that this season between teams that are pretty upset with everything happening with the Astros, specifically the New York Yankees. So I'm sure you're going to see a few people get plunked, some benches clearing. I think there's going to be a little drama with that storyline. So I'm excited.
Should start airing some of those Astro games on HBO at pay-per-view. All right, so you guys got anything else that you want to throw in before we wrap up this episode here?
I'd say one. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to go, but I guess one last memory I have is actually last year. I was fortunate enough to go to spring training. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to go, but it sounds like you guys are obviously big baseball fans, so it's definitely worth that trip. But I was actually there about a year ago last year, so I was there when the Phillies signed Harper.
Oh, that's
And
pretty awesome.
and it's just funny because you got a spring training game. It's nice, laid back, but then all of a sudden, the entire crowd just erupts and cheers and stuff because the first person someone sees it on their phone that we signed Harper, and the whole place just went crazy. So that's one other great memory, that a very recent
Uh,
memory that I got to have.
That's so
yeah.
cool.
I was fortunate enough to go down to the spring heading into the 2018 season. We went down for a couple games about a couple weeks before they signed Jake Arrieta, and yeah, it's beautiful. Where did you, Andrew? Where did you stay when you were down there? Did you stay in Tampa? Or did you stay in Clearwater?
We stayed in Clearwater. I don't know, some hotel right next to the park, basically,
That's
and then we have some family down there, so we stayed with our aunt and uncle for a little bit, and they live near the Rays Stadium, so we saw the Phillies go travel out to the Rays Stadium.
Oh yeah, it's truly remarkable, as you mentioned, Andrew. I was fortunate enough, so that Christmas, prior to going down to Florida, one of my Christmas gifts was actually an Aaron Nola jersey, and when I went down there, I happened to, you know, have the moment to meet Aaron Nola. He was signing autographs. There wasn't a big crowd, so I approached him and I said, "Hey man, can you sign the back of my jersey?" And he did, and now that is one of my most prized possessions. It's hung up in a nice, beautiful case, laying over my bed as I sleep. So it's it's one of those things. I love baseball. To have something like that, um, that's something very similar to the memories I have of certain games. That's something I look to treasure forever. So for that, experience alone, to meet a guy that I really liked watching. I think I actually saw Aaron Nola's major league debut when I believe he pitched a 6-inning 1-run game against the Rays, if I'm not mistaken.
The one run was a home run by the pitcher. I remember
Yes,
that.
yes. And just being able to watch him and, kind of always support him. I know he had a couple rough years after that first rookie season when he pitched rather well, and just to watch him come into his own, especially after the season he had, after that spring training, he was just, a top 3 pitcher in the National League that year. It's one of those, it's up there as one of my favorite moments. So if anyone listening, if you ever get the chance to go, it's truly wonderful. There's a great diner up the block that's kind of like Philly themed. It's called Lenny's. I don't know if you ate there, Andrew, when you were down there. But it's great food, about a couple blocks away from the park, so you can't beat it.
Yeah, it sounds like spring training down there is a hell of an experience. Unfortunately, I've never been to Philly spring training. I did go to one game, West Palm Beach. It was the Marlins and the Cardinals back when I was visiting my grandparents who used to live down that way. Never been to a Philly spring training game, so I definitely will be intending on making that happen sometime in the near future. Anyway, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the podcast to be named later, which, by the way, will be named later. We're still working on coming up with a new name, so definitely stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on, Apple Podcasts, I guess it is now. You can find us on Google Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud. You can also find us on Twitter at ANY Podcast. That is the Always Next to Your Podcast network. Our podcast in particular will be coming out with our own Twitter handle sometime in the near future. You can find our personal Twitters. I am at radio_Rob. Andrew, where can we find you?
I am AJ_Santangelo.
And Joe, where can we find you?
You can find me at Broseph Biscuit.
All right, and there it is. And now you know where to find us. And if you're looking for something to eat during Phillies games this season, there is no better option than Just Food. They've got 2 locations, one in Buckingham Green off of York Road in Buckingham, the other location at Delaware Valley College in New Britain. You can find them on the phone at 215-794-3663. That is 215-794-FOOD. They've got plenty of delicious options for all your catering needs, or if you just want to go in and grab a bite. There's so much to choose from there. Definitely a great spot to find a bite to eat if you're going to sit down and watch the Phillies, or for any occasion for that matter. Once again, Just Food, 215-794-FOOD. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast to be named later. We'll be back with another one probably within the next couple of days, so stay tuned.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a rib or two, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.